So now I get to introduce our plenary session. We do have a session with Tyler Technologies, and they're going to be presenting Unlocking the Power of Data and AI for Court Efficiencies. Harness the power of data analytics and AI to optimize your court operations while reducing administrative burdens. That sounds nice. Leverage valuable insights for strategic data-driven decision-making and generate revenue by maximizing the value of your data. Learn how to build an internal program to structure and protect your data and make it accessible to authorized stakeholders. Hear what your peers in the court industry are doing and best practices for utilizing automation to create safe and meaningful benefits for the judicial system. So I'd like to welcome Ryan. Ryan, your last name?
Barr.
Ryan Barr to the stage. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Good morning. How's everybody doing? This thing on yet? There we go. All right, I can hear myself in the room now. Excellent. My name is Ryan Barr. I have the privilege of serving as the Senior Vice President of Product Development and Strategy, which is a really long title, at Tyler Technologies. And what that means is that I spend my time working with y'all to understand the challenges that you face on a day-to-day basis and understand how we might be able to partner with you and your peers to help make the courts more effective, more efficient, make your life easier, and serve our collective constituents in a more meaningful and equitable way. So today we're gonna take a little bit of a journey and talk about some technology things. How many of you in the room are technologists? I might see like 3 or 4 hands. Yeah, okay, maybe 1, 2. Okay, good. I'm a technologist, but I'm also not. I've spent about half of my career not in technology. So I'm gonna try today to demystify a few things and share with you what others in the profession are doing and what some of our customers at Tyler are experiencing and talk about changes in technology, et cetera. But we're gonna start by taking a little bit of a history lesson. In 1860, the United States was a nation stretching from coast to coast, but communication was really difficult. Anybody think we had cell phones back in the 1860s? Oh, it was pretty hard, right? We didn't even have cars, we didn't have highways, we didn't have a whole bunch of things. And so innovation took over, right? And you had this thing called the Pony Express, this daring venture where young riders would relay mail almost 2,000 miles. And it completely changed the way that people engaged, the way that we could communicate. This could take a message from Missouri to California in under 10 days, which was unheard of. And we sort of romanticized the Pony Express, right? These riders are fantastic. We've got movies about them and all of these things. They battled harsh weather and all of these components. And do you recognize that the Pony Express only existed for 18 months? 18 months. And can you think of why the Pony Express might have gone out of business in 18 months? The telegram. The telegraph. The telegraph in October of 1861, the first transcontinental telegraph was implemented. And it obsoleted almost overnight the Pony Express riders. And one might think that that technological leap left them unemployed, in peril for their job, that all of a sudden there was nothing for them to do, which couldn't be further from the truth. That technology helped to change what those folks were able to do. Many of them became telegraph operators. Many of them adapted to that technology. They understood the various ways that connections could be made. They understood which city and connected to different places in an efficient way to transform and transfer information. But also I heard some folks say the railroad. Many of them took their sort of industrious nature to help go build the railroad, which allowed us to move goods across the nation and completely change that, right? But the key piece here is that technology didn't replace what those folks did. Technology elevated what they did. And I was talking earlier to Jude, and we were talking about how he remembers a day, as do I, where computers weren't like a thing. They weren't normal, right? We worked in environments that sort of look like this all of the time, right? where you had stacks and stacks of paper. Many of our courthouses still look like this. So does my office at times. But we were buried in paper. We used file folders and binders to cover almost everything that we did. And all of a sudden, this small machine shows up and begins to transform how we think. It begins to sort of pervade how our companies work. It is scary at some point, and we're not sure quite how to use it. And at first, that computer seemed like it was going to replace us, and that it was going to sort of swallow up all of our jobs and all the things that we were doing. And the reality is, we're here, and I don't know about y'all, but my life is sort of super dependent on technology on a day-to-day basis. Email communication, Microsoft Teams, Excel, Word, the tools that we use every day. And again, that technology, it didn't replace us. It transformed our jobs. It transformed our roles. It made us more efficient. It made us more effective. And so we find ourselves here today in 2025 with, again, more changes in technology. And it can be overwhelming, right? The internet, oh my goodness. I all remember, most of you in the room, I think, remember the late 90s, early 2000s, where, you had pets.com and the beginning of Amazon, and Amazon sold books. I mean, like, they sell books still, but now Amazon is this enormous marketplace, and the technology has continued to reshape the fabric of our society. It's also reshaping the way that we work and the things that we do and the roles and jobs that are available on a day-to-day basis. And like you were saying earlier, it's super important for us to think about, how do we train our existing team members, those team members that are on their way? How do we empower them to really understand what technology can do for us? How do we make sure as leaders that we understand where the state of technology is? It can be a shiny object that you can get attracted to that isn't necessarily beneficial for you, but it can also be the unlock to tremendous capability, effectiveness, equity, and a whole bunch of really good things. And we've got to be smart in how we think about it, right? Technology moves super fast. And today, new jobs are popping up, right? I mean, you see these folks with, 7, 8, 15 monitors and screens that look like movie theaters all the time, right? But technology, again, it's not removing jobs. It's empowering us and changing the things that we can do, the capability and scale upon which we can work in ways that is really transformative, in ways that we should be thinking about. How do we leverage those tools, those capabilities, to be able to best serve the communities that we care about and that we serve, the constituents that we care about, the profession of justice, the courts that we operate in, that we are to take care of? So let's think about that. I'm going to talk about 3 types of technologies today and give you some examples as we go through. Different types of technology to enhance the justice journey. I do work for Tyler Technologies. I'm going to do my best to not shill a whole bunch of products. I will reference a few, but more than anything, I want you to think about and understand where the state of play is in some of these things, how you as a decision maker, as an influencer, as a leader, can better apply these technologies, work in your court to understand where you have opportunities, and then leverage those to actually be able to impact the communities we serve in a more favorable way. Does that make sense? Everybody interested in that? I hope so. Yeah? Okay. All right. Who ran this morning? Any of you? A few of you? I have mad respect for every one of you. My excuse was that I had to get into a fancy sport coat, so I didn't go run. All right, so let's talk about 3 types of tech. We're going to talk about something called SaaS, software as a service. I'm going to demystify this a little bit and explain to you what it is. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to as cloud computing and other things. We're going to talk about analytics. This is different than just an Excel spreadsheet or a report that you use. And we'll talk about why analytics matter and how you might want to think about analytics and how analytics actually is empowered by SaaS, what that might look like for your court and what other courts are experiencing using analytics and AI. AI is emerging. I'm going to try and demystify a little bit of it for you. If you are an AI expert, I will apologize in advance. I'm going to oversimplify AI today, but I'm going to do that on purpose, and hopefully it will help you understand the field a little better and be able to apply AI in a meaningful way to your court. What's interesting is these tools, these technologies, they work together in a meaningful way, right? SaaS, anybody heard of cloud computing? Right? Anybody use like iCloud, or y'all use Office 365, I imagine, or most of you use Office 365. That's a SaaS product, and SaaS stands for Software as a Service. What that means predominantly is that whomever is providing that service, typically a software vendor, is accountable for all of the pieces of delivering that software product to you. Right? So you partner with that vendor and they deliver that service to you. Whereas in the old way that we operated, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years ago, you would buy a license. Anybody remember like Circuit City? Come on, somebody had to go to Circuit City, all right? Okay. You'd go and you'd buy a box of software, right? And you got like a CD, you still use CD-ROM, remember? My computers don't even have a CD drive, but you'd get a CD-ROM that had a license key printed on it. And enterprise software, like y'all use in your courts, wasn't exactly like that, but it sure rhymed. You would get a stack of CDs with license keys, and that would all get installed on machines that you managed, and your IT teams would spend a lot of capital investment and budget cycles on. And with SaaS, a lot of those operational concerns are removed, and it's really about a service that is continually updated and kept current to what's happening in technology on an infrastructure that can scale. And that scaling of the infrastructure is what's so important. Y'all do budget cycles, right? Everybody enjoy asking for capital, asking for large amounts of money that is going to get spent and depreciated over years. I don't either. SaaS removes a lot of those pieces. And what it does is it opens up an opportunity to use computing power when you need it, but not have to spend all of the capital to acquire it at once, right? You can think of it almost like an economies of scale type of play. When you put SaaS together with analytics, when you're processing large amounts of information, you sometimes need a lot of compute. You need a lot of computer power to look at this information. That can be really expensive if you have to buy it yourself. So when you put those analytic solutions up into a SaaS environment, you can start to do things that were very, very difficult to do in the past. And now when you add the most compute and power hungry thing that we've ever seen in technology, AI, into the fold, you really get into this environment where these three pieces of technology working together offer you in your court the ability to do things that candidly from a financial perspective might not have been viable in the past. The investment you would have to make is so substantial, and the technologists that you would have to have are so difficult to come by, and those skill sets are so unique that you might not have access to it. Whereas today, using kind of as technology has grown, we all collectively get access to tools and capabilities that are very transformative and very interesting. So let's park on this a little bit more. Is everybody tracking what I'm saying so far? It's hard to see you. Okay, I'm getting some head nods here. Good. I like to try and look at folks and connect with folks. And y'all are in the back. There's a lot of seats up front. Okay, so let's talk about SaaS a bit. I've mentioned a lot of this, right? SaaS is using the internet to securely deliver software solutions. Technology still runs on a server. So those servers have moved, those pieces have moved. And really what this is about having sort of that shared infrastructure that comes with a bunch of other benefits. And it's the other benefits that are so important for you as an operator and for you as an administrator and for you as a leader to understand and think about, are these right for my court? Those benefits are things like security and safety. And so when we think about the question of is SaaS right for government solutions, I would posit that the overwhelming answer is yes, without question. SaaS solutions are ideal for government solutions because you have an increasing need for speed. Your employees, your customers have increasing expectations of what you are going to provide to them. They have an increasing expectation of the quality and the sort of currency, if you will, the how new and how up to date the technology that you are delivering to them is. Right? You mentioned earlier the quality of the website, right? Those are things that are baseline expectations now. If a customer comes to the counter and they have a bad experience because the terminal on the back end isn't working, the credit card machine isn't working, all of those things add up to how trust in the judiciary is felt. And it's no longer the primary interaction that we do on a day-to-day basis is no longer going to the counter, right? The primary interaction on a day-to-day basis is on these things. It's on computers. And that technology and that scale and that expectation is ever growing. And SaaS gives us a place to go there. It protects data. Y'all heard of a cyber attack? Anybody? SaaS by itself doesn't give you a ton of data protection, but SaaS providers, because of how they've built what they do, have built-in controls and layers and layers and layers of security and armies of people that do security that can help to protect government data. Backups, restore, isolating components, isolating information. This can be very expensive. Anybody ever walked around a building and saw these things? I will, well, I'm in a large room, so I can't deny it, but I will admit, begrudgingly, that years and years ago, I would back up information on a device that I bought from Circuit City or Costco or whatever. And I would have critical business information, maybe with personally identifiable information and other things, sitting on a hard drive in what becomes really a truly unprotected, unsecure manner. This probably happens more often than any of us would like to admit. And when we use appropriately governed and managed solutions like a SaaS environment, we can prevent through policy, through technology, and through capability, we can at least minimize this sort of an event happening. We also, from a backup and a data storage perspective, have significantly better tools available to us, and I'll talk about those in a little bit. Here's another piece. You've heard of SaaS providers, AWS, Google Cloud Platform, Azure maybe is something that you might be familiar with, or your technologist that you work with might be familiar with. Those folks have invested billions with a B. Does anybody have $1 billion budget? I wish I had one. That would be awesome, right? So their budgets, this is just security. They've invested billions in security with armies of people that are defending on a day-to-day basis the information that sits in those environments. I would love to say that I had billions of dollars as a partner of many of you in the room. I don't. But we partner with, and I would suggest that you might want to consider partnering with, folks who have this sort of infrastructure and capability because the environment we're in is becoming ever more hostile. And it's not just cyber threats and cybersecurity, it's also just the general world that we live in, right? We need to be prepared. As leaders, a core part of our responsibility is continuity, right? If the court, if the environment, if the jurisdiction that you're in experiences a natural disaster, every one of us should be thinking about how do we ensure that court operations continue, right? What do we need to do if the courthouse isn't open? God forbid we get another global pandemic or something else. What do we need to do to ensure that justice can continue to be served? And this is a place where SaaS can help us to be prepared, right? You've got examples all the time happening with fires. I mean, just tragedy with hurricanes and natural disasters that are occurring. We have a customer who experienced a terrible tragedy in their jurisdiction, and it was all over the national news. It was really bad, but they were able to have the courthouse open, not the physical courthouse, but the virtual courthouse open the day after tragedy struck, allowing constituents to be able to get access to justice, file things when needed to be filed, communicate with the court, and advance what they needed to advance in a period of extreme stress and trouble. And it's not just natural disasters, it's also cyber attacks. I don't know about y'all, but this is the kind of stuff that keeps me up at night. There are probably some of you in this room who have experienced a cyber attack. If you haven't, I hope you never do. But I can tell you that these are situations where having a provider and a partner who has far more capability than any of us individually would have is hypercritical. We've had a couple of incidents with partners around the nation where, unfortunately, they've been attacked in an on-premise environment or a kind of legacy environment, and we've been able to partner with them in moving their court operations online within sometimes as few as 2 or 3 days, and be able to continue to provide access to justice and equity and justice. What's important here also, when you think about risk, in the event of a cyber attack, if someone gets into your system, they can touch the things that are connected in that one system. As you work with multiple providers to get into different areas of SaaS solutions, you can start to segment your risk, which as the leader and the administrator of the court helps you to ensure business continuity and access to justice in a way that we were not able to do 10 to 15 years ago. I hope that resonates and makes sense. And if it doesn't, I'd be happy to chat with folks about why those pieces are different and why they matter. But cyber resilience is critical. It's critical for maintaining consistent outcomes. And it's something that, as you think about from moving from potentially sort of a legacy on-premise environment toward SaaS solutions across your footprint, whether that be your case management solution, whether that be your office platform, whether that be, whatever tools you're thinking about, I hope you think about these things as areas that will help to provide resilience, safety, confidence, and build trust in the court. This is a really important component in a modern technology space where technology is becoming so critical to everything that we do. I'll move on to analytics and talk about how these pieces sit together. Anybody enjoy looking at reports? Oh, there are a few of us in the room. Great. All right. Anybody feel like getting information together to actually make a decision is super easy? None of you. Good. All right. There are very few liars in the room. That's great. So anybody feel like information is becoming more important? Anybody get pressure to make decisions based upon data, to provide evidence around why you might be making a choice, or to back up the efficacy of a choice that you've made, maybe a process change, maybe a different way of doing something in the court, and be able to prove that it worked or it didn't work? Anybody deal with that at all? A few of you. Okay, good. Data is critical, right? Data can be stitched together in lots of ways. As I looked at, I don't come from the court sector for the vast majority of my career. I spent the better part of my career, about 20 plus years, in the private sector, in a company that was very forward in using information, using technology. We sold consumer packaged goods, but we use information to make decisions. And we use a lot of legacy tools and capabilities and put a huge amount of effort into making decisions with information, which gave us an advantage in how we did what we did. And as I entered into working with y'all, I've been surprised at how difficult it is in most situations for people to get information and use that information in a positive, helpful way. So I'm going to ask you to think about how you might want to reconsider how you do this, leveraging some of these technologies we've talked about. Analytics is really about taking a lot of different information together from different sources and then using, again, modern technologies to stitch that data together. And I'll walk through a graphic here that'll hopefully make this make sense. And then we'll talk about what this actually means in action. So data might feel and look like this. I've got tons of it, all these little dots on the screen, right? I've got some yellow dots, some, orange dots, some light blue dots, some dark blue dots. And this could be Excel sheets. This could be extracts from your case management system. This could be, information. This could be documents. It could be filings. It could be PDFs. It could be any number of things. But there's this just vast amount of information that we have. And I don't know, maybe you need to answer about, the amount of time that it takes on average to dispose a certain type of case in your court. Maybe you need to understand the types of filings that are coming through that are having problems and need to go back to the filer, right? Whether that be pro se or whether that be attorneys. Maybe you need to do all these different things. And these can be challenging, like simple, but challenging questions to answer with all of this information. But if we use technology well, we can start to take those pieces of data together and put them into like structures, like components, right? So if I need to ask that question about maybe what sort of filers are struggling, what sort of filings are coming through my courthouse that I need to go rework, I need to understand what filings are coming into the courthouse. I need to understand the follow-on steps that occurred in those filings. I probably need to understand actually what was filed and why there was a problem, right? There's information that can be difficult to gather from that. And so robust analytic solutions can help stitch those pieces of data together and start to create insights out of that data. It can start to maybe form that into a chart, a story, a graph that can begin to help you make decisions. And ideally, you can put those into dashboards and into tools where you can start to dig into that information and make better decisions, because all of that information is coming together to you in these large scale computing environments. And let me actually talk about a customer who's done this. So Parker County in Texas, the district court uses Tyler's electronic filing solution and our electronic filing analytics solution. And they implemented e-file analytics in 2022. And we've got things with statewide statistics and other components available in our electronic filing solution. So Parker County can say, hey, how are we doing versus our peer group? If the state has asked us to make a change, how are we doing versus that? If we are underperforming and we go implement changes, are we moving more toward our peer group? Or are we overperforming? And how can we take our best practices and share those with our peer group to say, hey, here's things that you might want to do because we're demonstrating really good outcomes in our court. And so one of the things that, anybody have a hard time finding employees? Yeah, all right, yeah, us too. One of the things that the folks in Parker did is they said, our employees matter a lot. They're probably the most important thing that we have. I feel that way about the folks on my team, and I hope every one of you feels the same way about the folks on your team. And we need to understand their workload. We need to understand what's going on. What does that experience look like? And how can I help better balance that workload? And so they went through and looked at this information, and they were able to identify different areas where employees were overloaded, helping to change some staffing components. And we'll talk about actually here on the next slide, where they actually took that information into the budget cycle, and using analytics and good information, we're actually able to go make budget recommendations that were backed up to go change staffing mix, add folks to different areas of the organization where it was necessary. They also had a large amount of rejections that were coming through. And they wanted to understand why those things were happening, and then go address those issues directly with attorneys or with court staff. Sometimes it's a training problem. The document was fine, but the court staff didn't quite understand it. Sometimes it's the document is being filed incorrectly, and the attorneys are not aware of exactly how it should be filed from the process perspective. And they were able to use these insights and analytics to go tackle those pieces. And then in the budgeting piece, they took all of these components to basically say, hey, look, we've reduced incoming filing issues in a meaningful way. We've optimized employee workload in areas where employee workload was out of balance. We're seeing increasing filings in these areas for these socioeconomic and demographic reasons. And we're asking you to invest in dollars in more people in these areas because of these reasons. And the Commissioner Court granted those budget requests because they were well thought out. The work was already done to understand why. The improvements had already been made in the areas where the improvements could be made. And those analytic tools were able to help the court administrator make a better decision and make a better budget request, as it's grounded in sometimes some very difficult patterns to understand. Budgeting's great. Well, I don't know. I don't like budgeting, but getting staff and meeting the needs of our organization is great. But also we've got day-to-day challenges. Tarrant County, it's Fort Worth, for those of you that don't know all the counties in Texas. Tarrant County also uses our e-file analytics solution, and I love the way that Clint talks about what they do with this. Clint actually uses these analytics as a real-time gauge to understand how he should be operating the court. How many of you have folks that look at, queues or that manage particular things, right? They have a portion of their work that is sort of prescribed and reasonably stable, right? Regardless of what's actually happening, because you might not have visibility to it. Clint realized that was happening, and he said, it'd be a whole lot smarter if I could go look at exactly what's going on in my court and reallocate effort to where it's the most beneficial in a real-time basis. And so I love this quote. On those heavy case days, management knows if I shift Sally over here and have her focus on this, she can go get that work done. But then, this is the key part, conversely, on the slower days, it allows us to predict when it's going to be slow, and then we can manage staff, moving them around because we don't need them sitting there watching a queue. If it's hard to get people, and people matter the most, we should probably think about how do we use technology to help us make our people's lives better and help them do more meaningful work on a day-to-day basis. And this is something that a strong analytics suite can enable you to tackle a problem in a different way. The same thing, I pressed the wrong button. There we go. The same thing, although slightly similar, is happening in Denton County, Texas. We have a statewide analytics solution in Texas. So it actually does, it helps a lot with these comparative components that you're seeing in these case studies. Again, this is sort of back to training. Can it be hard to understand exactly what skill sets your people have and where they might be struggling? Right? I mean, I do one-on-ones with all of my staff, and I do skip levels with my team. I suspect you do the same, and the managers that are in your organization do the same. But it can be hard without good information to understand where training might be necessary and where maybe training programs that we think are working well aren't actually working well. And this is a spot where analytics has been able to help David manage his team differently to understand where training might need to be applied because staff are struggling in certain areas, or understanding where somebody is just a rock star in an area. And when I need help, I can lean into that rock star and have good objective information, empirical evidence that can be used to help manage the team and manage the staff differently. All right, so tech is moving around. I hope those use cases resonate a little bit and why analytics might help. We're going to talk a little bit and move toward AI, right? All this data is moving around. Court data must be accurate. It's really important. Actually, before I get to AI, we'll talk 1 second about managing information in a way that really takes the responsibility of our custodianship extremely seriously. Anybody know what a scraper is? Anybody heard that? A bot? Right? Anybody have a portal that has folks scrape information, the public record? Anybody know what that is? Yeah? A couple of hands in the room? Okay. Everybody wants our data all the time. Right? If that's not obvious, I think it's really important for us to understand. We, as leaders in this space, have a really important and sobering duty to protect that record. The public needs to have access to the information, but we also need to make sure that if something happens in the judicial process where that record needs to be sealed, expunged, it's not available, that happens, and that happens with appropriate custody of that data. This is an area where inaccurate data can actually lead to really terrible things. Information being exposed that shouldn't be exposed, unlawful arrests, can lead to a whole bunch of really terrible outcomes and dangerous situations. And so it's really important that we think about, in terms of analytics, data management, SaaS, and who you partner with and how you partner with in public access to information, that information is appropriately custodied and that the lineage of the data over time is managed. I'm not going to get too far into product sales and all those sorts of things from this stage, but I do want you to really think about your public access and those types of solutions and partners who can help you understand the lineage of data and the custodianship of data. We have a couple of folks that we work with. We mentioned in the kind of the preamble to the presentation about helping you to potentially actually generate revenue with information and data. I imagine some of you do document sales of court records, record sales. You might even work with data partners who work with that data. And I would encourage you, as you think about that, and as you think about that opportunity for your court, to make sure that whomever you're working with really understands and takes serious the need to understand the current status of the record and be able to pull information back into your custodianship once that information has left. If you think about putting information out to the public, right? I mentioned those hard drives earlier. I don't have my flash drive in my pocket anymore. But once I have that information, it's mine. It's gone. It's outside of the four walls of the court. It's a digital asset. It's out, right? It's like a photocopy from days past, right? I got the thing off the photocopy or off the printer and I have it. It's mine. As technology solutions and information solutions become more prevalent, which they are every day, and as data is consumed by more parties every day, it's really important for you as leaders to think about who do you partner with that can help in the governance of that and can help in the back-end technology to retract that information when that information needs to be retracted, to protect and secure that information when it's available, and help to custody it in the digital age, right? It's different than it was 15 years ago, and it's becoming more and more challenging. We can talk to you about that in lots of different ways. It's a complicated topic, but it's a topic that is growing in its urgency more and more every day. And now we're going to pivot to AI. Anybody know what AI is? All right, everybody talks about AI. You can't go to a conference and not talk about AI, right? Like, is everybody excited that we're going to talk about AI? I'm getting a little tired of talking about AI, candidly. But AI is actually pretty interesting. So let's talk about it for a minute and talk about why it's interesting. It's not this. Although I do love C3PO and R2D2, they are really cool. But this is not what we're talking about. Does anybody think of this when they think of AI? Anybody? Okay, all right. Do you think of this? iRobot. Okay, yes. I saw Terminator on your slides. And so, yeah, we're not talking about Terminator either. We're also not talking about this creepy person who's sitting in your courtroom waiting to come in, although you do have cool wall art. This is not what we're talking about. Now, this might be what AI looks like in the future. I don't know. But that's not what we're talking about generally when we're talking about AI and the implication and the practical usage of AI in your court. Okay, is anybody in here an AI expert? I want to know who's gonna come talk to me later and tell me I oversimplified this. Okay, good. It's a safe crowd. Perfect. All right. Modern AI works on kind of three types of thinking. Generative, which we'll come back to. We'll talk a lot about that. That's just like ChatGPT and all the cool stuff that makes things. Generative, it generates stuff. There's two real kind of core, again, I'm oversimplifying. There's two kind of core models that run most of these solutions. They're probabilistic and deterministic models. Anybody take a stats class? Anybody really like math? Okay, a few, not very many. Okay, so probabilistic and deterministic are really about how you evaluate a problem set and what the outcome might be from the problem set. A deterministic model, again, oversimplifying, has a known set of inputs that can then create a known set of outputs. So you tell me it's like real simple. You give me a 2 and a 2, I give you a 4. That would be a way oversimplified deterministic type of model. It's trained on information and it knows how to take things and make a thing. And you do that on things that are super repetitive, things that can be done over and over and over and over and over. And you can determine with extraordinarily high precision what the right outcome is because I've seen all the stuff coming in already, right? It's kind of an oversimplification of a deterministic model. A probabilistic model, on the other hand, is sort of a mathematical framework that uses probability theory to handle uncertainty in the decision making. So 2 and 2 is 4 is pretty simple. 2 and x is 4 is like a little more algebraic. I mean, I can break that down in algebra, but there might be some uncertainty in that if I don't know exactly how to do that math problem. And so a probabilistic model might, if you were a really terrible algorithm, might throw a few answers at that and determine which one had the highest probability of being the right answer of X, right? They're gonna estimate the likelihood of different outcomes or different answers based upon the information that they are privy to and the training set that they have been built on. So these help us make informed choices when we have incomplete or ambiguous information. If for those of you that took a stats class, or maybe some of you even have a degree in stats, that would be awesome. You might think of levels of confidence, right? So a confidence interval on an answer. And a probabilistic model is going to rely a lot on that confidence interval stuff. And so these different types of models can help us do different things. And I'll talk about how this applies in why AI, analytics, and SaaS work together so well and how you might want to be thinking about this as we go forward. But I do want to approach maybe some suggestions for y'all, and I'll talk about how Tyler thinks about things as well. How does Tyler think about AI? I don't think it's a shiny toy that every one of you should have for every use case. In fact, I think that's a terrible way to approach AI. You really want to focus, in my opinion, with where it is today, you really want to focus on automating solutions to real problems rather than just implementing technology because it's interesting and because it's cool and because everybody else is doing it. In fact, I would argue that's tremendously risky, and I would caution you against doing that. Sometimes being on the front end of technology is beneficial, and there are places where AI is going to be very beneficial. But when you're talking about the systems and the solutions and the processes that we are the custodians of, you need to be thoughtful with how you apply technology. Yes, I'm a technology vendor. Yes, we sell technology. I'm telling you, be really careful with where and how you implement technology. There are lots of white papers out there. I will be candid and share that most of them I want to throw across the room. This one I think is fantastic. If you have not read this report from the Conference of State Court Administrators on generative AI, this is a really well put together white paper. There's a QR code, you can click on it. I read a lot of these generative AI papers, and like I said, many of them make me, they're so biased in one side or the other. Hey, you should do everything with generative AI, it's the best thing ever, or avoid it because it's gonna kill your children, right? Like, these are terrible outcomes, and it's not real. You have to have a balanced approach to what's going on. In this Costco white paper, toward the end of it, there's a quote that's gonna come up here on the board. And it's really important. You can read the white. I'm gonna read the yellow. Just summarize what they said. In other words, start with the problem, not the technology. So if you have a real problem in your court and you understand that problem, then you can start looking at where technology, maybe AI, might apply. I'm gonna give you some examples here in a minute of places where AI can help you. But if you don't have these problems, please don't just chase technology. It's a bad idea. And it will lead to outcomes that you're not excited about. And we'll talk about a few of those in a minute. As we get into how technology might help you, I showed the cute little C-3PO and R2-D2 and iRobot, and we had the Terminator earlier. Let's get a little bit of framing on what an agent is and what a robot is. Can anybody kind of guess where I'm going with agents and robots? Agents are software. They live in the digital space. I imagine probably most of you in the room use Copilot. You might use ChatGPT. You might use Grok, right? Pick your AI. Those are generative AI. Pick those things that you use, hopefully not to produce court record, because they tend to hallucinate and do other things. And there are ways to control that we can talk about. But agents are all about automating things in the virtual or digital world. Robots, hardware, automation, they do physical tasks. They're about the physical environment, right? They look kind of like this. And candidly, I think AI and robots are going to have a huge impact on society in warehouses, in the physical space. I think there's going to be lots of really interesting things. I don't know that we need to be concerning ourselves in our courts with a lot of that yet. Maybe eventually, but probably not today. We probably need to be thinking about where digital agents can help us embrace technology to make people's lives better, to make their work more efficient, to be able to focus on more strategic work. We've talked about how people, without question, are the most important asset that we have. And if I have my people doing something that is repetitive, that an agent can be doing for them, that yes to that work is a direct no to a lot of other work. And that other work may be far more important to build trust, to connect with our customers, to connect with our constituents, to do the things that need to be done to advance the work that we're doing, versus taking care of something that candidly, as technology has grown, can be automated. Let's go back for a minute, talk about the Pony Express. My wife is in Dallas area in Texas. I mean, it would be kind of interesting to talk to somebody and be like, yo, get on a horse and ride to Dallas and talk to my wife because I want to send her an information and tell her I love her. It's a whole lot easier for me to grab my phone and say, hey, I love you. Have a great day, right? Automating that task using that technology, I mean, I'm doing the typing, so that part's not automated, but using the technology makes sense. And that person who could have been riding that horse can now do something far better. So we need to think about that when we think about using these tools. So let's talk about some examples. Now, admittedly, some of these are not direct to your court, but I want you to think about, as leaders, how these examples might apply to problems that you might have, and then think about how these technologies might help you. So we're going to do this in sort of a side-by-side. Here's a deterministic problem and a probabilistic problem, right? Back to the different types of AI. And then how those things might come together, giving you analytics and AI to make better decisions. So let's start. Again, we talked about probabilistic and deterministic. So let's start with payroll. Does anybody run payroll or have accountability for payroll? You probably have a team of folks that do that for you, I would imagine. Anybody like forecasting payroll and costs? I don't know, I don't like forecasting payroll and costs. It can be difficult. What if I'm making staffing changes? What if the law is changing, right? There's a lot of things in there. So on a deterministic side, it's pretty easy for us to put an agent in place that can take inputs, hourly wages, tax rates, deductions, union contracts if you have them, et cetera, and determine an outcome of what a rate of pay should be. It's harder, and technology can help us to maybe forecast future payroll costs, accounting for variables like overtime, employee turnover. Anybody have an employee turnover happen ever? You have to guess when you might hire people. Maybe you do what if scenario planning, all of those sorts of things to understand what your budget might look like. Policy changes, or uncertain funding sources. Right? Anybody have an uncertain funding source? That shows up every now and again. So when you put these pieces together, analytics and AI agents, you can start to have capabilities where day-to-day payroll is run deterministically. A human can double check that, make sure it's good, spot check. At some point, you get very comfortable and confident with what the agent is doing, and you broadly let it go. But then you can use those probabilistic models that take all that same data in that same SaaS solution to simulate scenarios that inform your longer-term budget decisions, that inform how you lead and make decisions in your court. Go to a direct justice example. The case management system initiates court hearings. Maybe it says, hey, there's a follow-on hearing 30 days after a filing, or it dismisses the case if no filing is set within a specific cadence. You have a rule for that, right? Most modern case management systems would allow you to have some sort of a configurable tool set where you could say, if this, then this, do these things, right? Very deterministic, very simple. Probabilistically, though, you might want to predict the likelihood of case backlogs in particular courts based upon maybe caseload trends, judge availability, seasonal variation. Maybe there's legislation happening that you're aware of that you think is going to spike or lower things. And you want to understand what those pieces are. Bringing those components together, AI agents can help to enhance both your operational capability as well as your strategic foresight into what's going on. Right? You can utilize those components to better interpret that justice data, that judicial data, and then help to manage your process, courts, and make better decisions. But you need all that information together to be able to do that in a way that makes sense. Maybe law enforcement, right? In this case, 911 calls come into the call center. Computer aided dispatch, they get it. There's a burglary in progress. They're going to dispatch officers immediately, right? It's a clear input-output. An agent can handle that. The human says, yep, and the agent does the dispatch. The human doesn't have to touch anything in that case. But probabilistically, maybe you want to assess crime risk in different neighborhoods based upon historical data, time of day, socioeconomic factors, other sorts of things, predicting maybe where crime is likely to occur. If you put those pieces together, again, AI agents and analytic solutions can help to probabilistically deploy and forecast where higher crime risk might exist, and then deterministically, maybe even move resources, not necessarily to a particular neighborhood or a particular area, but move resources toward this precinct or that precinct based upon historical and projected trends in what's been happening. So again, all of these sorts of things work together, and there's a ton of examples across a ton of areas where the operational decisions that you make and then the forecasts that these tools can help you make can help you operate more efficiently on a day-to-day basis. Sundar, the CEO of Google, says that we're defining agentic AI as systems that can plan autonomously to take actions and meet goals. So our job is to think about what are the actions we might want something to take? But more importantly, what are the goals and the outcomes we might want it to achieve? And are those things where our people need to be there, watching, doing, touching? Or is it governing and oversight? Or maybe even we trust it enough that we can be hands-off and we can manage by exception. But as we understand those use cases, we can start to put these technologies into place in a meaningful way. Again, back to people, because they matter a lot. Y'all feeling a labor shortage? Yeah. It's not just the court. There's story after story of, how difficult it is to find folks. One of the folks here in the audience is a customer of Tyler, and I didn't ask her ahead of time if I could use her name, so I won't. But I know that she's struggling to get staff. That in the past, there would be a line of applicants out the door. And today you're lucky to get a handful. And the handful, in many cases, aren't hyper-qualified either. That's not good. So we need to think about how do we make those jobs more enticing? When we do bring in those new employees, how do we train them? How do we empower them? How do we give them the technology that's going to make them more effective, but also enjoy what they do. I don't know about y'all, but I don't like doing the same thing over and over and over. I get bored, right? It becomes tedious. And if there's work like that we can offload to technology, it's a really good idea to offload it to technology with appropriate controls. Anybody facing budget pressures? None of you? That's awesome. Can I like, your jurisdictions are amazing. You would be the exception to the rule. I think most of us are facing budget pressures. And the adage of do more with less feels, I don't know, hollow. But I think it's real. And I think if we think about it as leaders, it's about being more effective, getting more done by doing things more efficiently, not necessarily do more with less, but do more because you can do it more effectively, right? Go back to the Industrial Revolution. Think of the Model T, right? Henry Ford told you can get your Model T in any color that you want, as long as it's black, because they had this production line where they could build these machines super fast. Before that existed, you need an army of people to do that, right? So unemployment's near historic lows. Labor force participation is near historic lows. We've got to digitize. We've got to think about how do we, in the work that we do, which is not building cars, right? It's serving the community. It's ensuring that justice occurs, that it's fair, that it's efficient, that everybody has access to that capability. How do we do more with less? How do we digitize for accuracy, for efficiency? How do we leverage technology to accomplish tasks differently? I don't know about y'all, but I get really frustrated when I ask a question of why do we do this? And the answer is because that's the way we've always done it, right? Drives me bonkers. Don't get caught in that trap. Look at the work that you have and ask yourself, is there a different way to do this, right? It's more important than ever to retain employees. And the folks that are really thinking about technology can look at a problem and they get way more frustrated than I do with that because that's the way we've always done an answer. They'll lose their mind because they know there's so many better ways to do it. And as leaders, we need to be thinking about that, right? It's essential that we maximize that productivity. Okay. Because remember, computers are going to eliminate all of our jobs. This is from 1983, y'all. People have been afraid of this nonsense forever. We're all still employed, and computers have done what? They've empowered us. They've elevated us. So please think about technology as something that can do that. Back to that Model T and why that matters. We get more done today. This is like, I've got a degree in economics, so I apologize. Productivity, think of it as the work that gets done. And compensation, think of it as the cost of doing the work. We've had a long-term trend since some of the earlier industrial revolutions of more and more getting done with less and less resources being required to get the same output. That's leverage. We need to be thinking about that because that work is now more interesting. It requires more of our human creativity. We're removing the things that are repetitive, that can be automated by different types of technology, and allowing human ingenuity, which I don't know about y'all, but that's what I find super fun about what I do. And I suspect that's the same for most of you and for your staff, to allow that ingenuity to go solve those problems. So AI. If you use ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, Grok, Claude, pick your poison. There's a lot of them. Employees on average are saving about 1.75 hours a day. So that's pretty cool. Maybe we should open it up and let everybody do everything in AI all the time. What do you think? Terrible idea. You might be like these folks in New York who did some really dumb things and got in trouble because AI is still an emerging technology. you need to check its work, especially in the generative space. Oh my gosh. Anybody like having citations get created that are totally fake? Anybody like building a PowerPoint presentation or a document and handing it over and reading it later and go, oh my gosh, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that are happening in this space. We're getting better and better and better at controlling this. And candidly, in I don't know if it'll be 6 months or 6 years, what generative tools are going to do is going to be transformative. We may be able to apply it to lots of areas in the justice process. We may be able to apply it in actually building briefs in a way that is safe and confident and comfortable. Today, it's pretty early tech, and there's a lot of risk in doing that. So I would caution you to maybe think about places where others are seeing benefit and seeing real results. Let's talk about that. Again, people, they're hard to get, and they're not cheap. This is actually informed by ChatGPT, so AI. So if these stats aren't right, you can blame ChatGPT. ChatGPT says that an average, the things are over the front. I'll read you the number. The average worker, data entry worker costs, let me see, hold on. My slide's small over here. $57,725 a year. And they're gonna do data entry. All right, so Tyler has over 200,000 electronically filed documents show up into its system every day, managed by data entry workers, your staff, who are, according to ChatGPT, making roughly $57,725 a year. And those folks are looking at that. They're handling those filings every day, electronic filings. They're processing that. They're looking at that document. They're reviewing it manually in File and Serve. They manually put that into typically enterprise justice. They docket that. And that takes time. And it's highly repetitive. That time is about 3.5 minutes on the review side and about 4 minutes on the docketing side. So about 7.5 minutes per filing, which doesn't sound like a lot, does it? I mean, 7.5 minutes, that's not crazy. Well, add that up. That's $825,000 of labor cost just with what is going through Tyler systems, right? That's not even the entire nation. But just with the stuff that's going through Tyler systems, there's $825,000 of labor cost, almost $200 million a year of human capital being spent doing something that is repetitive. Not all of it. Some of it is super complicated, and I want people looking at it. But a portion of it is highly repetitive and can be automated. That's where AI in analytics, we were talking about e-file analytics comes into play. An agent can look at the documents that are submitted. It can evaluate those documents. It can do some tasks that many of you and words that you're probably familiar with and technologies that you're familiar with. It can OCR, it can classify, it can extract, it can even redact information from a document. That agent can use deterministic and probabilistic modeling to understand what's the likelihood that I know how to actually process this well. And if the likelihood is extremely high, that agent can process that document. They can docket it. They can process the envelope. They can put it into the CMS. They can do all those things, and they can do that on the fly. Now, back to the types of models, if probabilistically the agent says, ooh, I'm not sure that I know what to do with this, it's below my threshold, right? Let's say it's 83% probability that I know what to do with it. Maybe that's too low for me. Probably be too low for me. I want a human to go look at that. Great. Now my humans are looking at things, my staff are looking at things that they should be looking at, where their creativity, their ingenuity, their knowledge, their training, their care of the people that we are serving can go in to make sure that that document is well understood and it's appropriately docketed, it's appropriately handled. And if the system is designed well, that information then feeds back into the system where it gets smarter, and it can now pick that up next time. It might need to do that a few times. But what you end up with is effectively near zero errors. You can almost eliminate document review. And these things, look, it's just bits and bytes and computing power. They run in a data center. They run 24/7, 365. And when they have a problem, they can sit it in a queue and wait for a human, an employee, a person that we care about, to come in and look at that and say, okay, I need to determine what I'm going to do with this. And then they can take care of that and make sure the right thing is done, which allows us to increase employee satisfaction. So I don't have to do that repetitive work all day long. I don't have to monitor that queue. So what does this look like in the real world? There's a couple of places that are doing this. It's not just courts. New York City does this for land records documents using Tyler solutions. The United States Army does this for personnel documents using Tyler solutions. Palm Springs, which is Palm Beach County in Florida, uses this for electronic filing. And they aren't a Tyler CMS customer. But let's talk about Tarrant County, Texas. Tarrant County had a 48-hour intake backlog. What's the legislative requirement to have information available when it's filed with the court? It's not 48 hours, right? It's a little faster than that. And so Tarrant County was sitting on a 48-hour e-file intake backlog. Things would come into the system, they'd be sitting there and there weren't enough staff to process it. They couldn't get through it. They implemented our solution, an AI-based solution, and eliminated that down to minutes. You file a filing in Tarrant County, Texas, it's in minutes. It's pretty awesome. Stanislaus County, California, my old stomping grounds, they had over 300 cases sitting in their criminal backlog, and that backlog has been eliminated. Again, using the same AI agent. They didn't have the people to keep up with it, right? You go to the commissioner's court and you say, I need more people. I want more budget to go deal with filings. The answer is not typically very excited on that, right? The answer is figure it out. Well, these guys have figured it out, leveraging technology to enhance their effectiveness and their efficiency. I'm going to throw dollars and cents up on the board. Our data shows in the marketplace, in this particular use case, AI agents generate about a 75% savings in terms of the cost to do the work. In no way, shape, or form am I suggesting that you should do reductions in force and those sorts of things, but we're talking about leverage. The same output for a lower cost, which means that if I can't find someone to fit that position, or I am able to receive additional budget dollars, I can do more with those scarce resources. So this is a case where, as a court leader, you can get about a 4-to-1 return on the work using technology, which opens up, if I have 4 team members, opens up 3 of them to start doing the things that I'm not able to do today, which may be more technology, okay, fine, or maybe it's looking at court operations, maybe it's partnering in the community, maybe it's implementing a training program, right? Maybe it's a whole bunch of other things that really matter because you're opening up and you're getting leverage. We do this with over 12, I'm sorry, not over 12, we do this with 12 national CMS vendors. And so this isn't something that you have to be vendor locked in, right? This isn't you got to come to Tyler and only do Tyler. There are solutions out there that do these sorts of things from all types of vendors and all types of partners that you have in the space. So I would encourage you, again, think about how might these tools and technologies help you? AI is really a triple threat. When used well, it can help with productivity in a meaningful way. It can help with decision-making because the amount of work that it can do and the amount of scenarios and outcomes that it can generate dwarfs what we can do in our human capacity. Now, we have to make the decisions ultimately, especially in those forward-looking components. And it can also help tremendously with service delivery. Speed, accuracy, those components are super important in how AI can help you. So I would encourage you, again, think about where might these tools help and what might you want to implement in your court? Technology can strengthen trust in our justice journey. I mentioned I was talking to Jude earlier, and we were talking about back when computers weren't kind of running the world. Technology's only real good purpose is to support what we do, right? At least in my mind. I don't subscribe to the idea that having the coolest, shiniest object is going to do us the most value and do us best as leaders. Technology's purpose is to support, empower, and elevate the work that we do. And when it comes to trust in the justice process, the world around us is becoming so dominated by technology that we would be fools to not put a lot of mental energy, thought, strategic planning into understanding how technology is implementing the broader justice process and how we might want to use technology to protect what we have been entrusted to in our jurisdictions, in the communities that we serve. Trust in the justice journey means, in terms of modern technology, trust that your data is accurate and your data is protected. I would posture that today, SaaS solutions give you a tremendous leg up on any of the other modalities that you have typically used historically. Not saying that they are the silver bullet and they solve everything, but if you want to have trust that your data is accurate and protected, this is a way for you to get a leg up in that space with partners who can assist you in a meaningful way. Trust means that your data is accessible to you, your constituents, and that your data is understandable. And this is where analytics solutions can help you in a meaningful way, because that data must be transparent. People must be able to see it. You need to be able to explore it. You need to be able to synthesize those pieces together so that you can make better decisions and you can share that information transparently with the communities that we all collectively serve, with the constituents that we're working with our peers to generate best practice. And we can use that data to make better decisions, improving what we do and how we do what we do. And trust in AI technology is taking that data to new levels of clarity for effective decision making. This doesn't necessarily mean letting the AI make the decision. It's not what I'm saying. But if I let the AI make the decision or the model make the decisions in areas where the model has high confidence and high degrees of trust already, I free my team members to help make better decisions everywhere else, to help shape what's happening, to be engaged in the process, to talk to the self-represented litigant and walk them through the process, to explain the weird legal terms that we have that I look at them like, I don't know what that means. But that's what we begin to open up. And as we look at these pieces of technology and we put them together and think about how we can do things more effectively in our courts, these pieces together, I hope for you, allow you to sleep well at night. Because we live in a world today where it can be hard to sleep well at night with the threats that are in front of us. But when you use these pieces of technology together well, I think this will help you really be in a spot where you can be confident that your team is empowered, your technology is helping you, and you're going to be able to get a good night's sleep on an ongoing basis as you continue to move your court forward. I want to thank you all for your time. We've got a future-proofing white paper that you can take a look at. There's a QR code here if you're interested in it. It talks about some of these technologies and how these pieces come together. I'll leave that up for just 1 second. We've got a booth tomorrow. We've got a good team of folks here from Tyler. Please come talk to the team. If you have questions, I'm around. I would love to talk to you. Many of you in the room I have not had the pleasure of meeting, but I would love to have a chance to chat with you. Our booth, I believe, is number 400. If I screwed that up, I apologize. It'll say Tyler. It's pretty obvious. But really, thank you I know it can be sometimes challenging to listen and engage in a conversation that may not be the area that you spend the most time thinking about. But I would challenge each and every one of us. This is our accountability. Whether we like it or not, every one of us is a technologist. We must be, because we live in a world that is being governed and driven by technology, and we better take that responsibility very, very seriously. So thank you all for your time. It's been a pleasure.